Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great, and it's a great day to break down another big trade, as well as some of the single biggest questions ahead of what should be an ever-eventful Week 8 in the NFL. So joining me as they do every single Wednesday here on the Fantasy Life Show, Dwain, The Rock McFarland, and Chris, the Sensei Storm Chaser Allen. And fellas, the NFL does not sleep. Dwain, Patrick Mahomes has himself a new wide receiver one.
He does. Is it a wide receiver one? It's probably a wide receiver one on the Chiefs, but is it really a wide receiver one? Yeah, we got DeAndre Hopkins, man. I will say this, like DeAndre Hopkins, I was going through some of our fantasy teams last night, Ian, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I had Hopkins marked as a drop. Now I'm going to have to go back and undo all those things. I was like, man, give me Troy Franklin. Give me Cedric Tillman. Give me something. I'm done with you, DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm going to have to go back and undo those, Mr. Hartitz.
All those 2 and 5 squads. Suddenly new life out here, Dwain. Chris, how we feeling?
I'm feeling fine. I know that when I woke up this morning and I saw the trade news, actually the first thing that I saw was from one of my sicko leagues where somebody had already immediately picked up DeAndre Hopkins off the waiver wire after seeing the trade news. Because I saw the pickup notification. I was like, why is somebody picking up DeAndre Hopkins? And then I saw the trade notification. So that's how we work here in these fantasy streets. But happy to dive into it and see what else is going on.
There are some sickos out there who wake up at like 4 a.m. just to get the first pass at their now open waiver wire. And I would like to imagine someone did that, was done at like 6 a.m., was like, all right, time to go about my day. And then they actually missed the DeAndre Hopkins opportunity to go get him because, sometimes it just sucks to suck. So plenty more to get to on Hopkins. But first, guys, I want to give a quick shout out to Fantasy Life Plus. Fantasy Life Plus is our premium product over here at Fantasy Life, where we're just trying to help make you, a scholar, that much better at fantasy football and get you one step closer to capturing championship glory. From our full consensus ranks to Dwain's utilization tool suite, our waiver wire tool, recommended fab, start, sit, helper, all that and so much more. Not trying to break your bank account. Under $10 per month for even our tier 2 package. Under $40 per year for our tier 1 business. So check it out, Fantasy Life Plus. All right, fellas, let's get more into that DeAndre Hopkins trade because, again, still being finalized, but the Chiefs have agreed to send a 5th rounder that could turn to a 4th to the Tennessee Titans in return for the 32-year-old veteran wide receiver. So, Dwain, as much as I don't love the thought of, again, a person already dealing with knee injuries whose best football is behind him and relying overly on that in fantasy land, we did just see Juju Smith-Schuster go for 130 yards in this offense, and he hasn't had knees for years at this point. So, overall thoughts on the upside of what Hopkins could do with Patrick Mahomes throwing on the football.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, should I be more excited about Hopkins getting to leave the Titans and play with the Chiefs, or should I be more sad that the Chiefs literally saw 1 week of trying to give a workload to Xavier Worthy and said, we're done. We're done. They gave the guy, they're moving around, getting him targets, and it's just like, yeah, it's like that Jonah Hill meme, we're just going to move on. Well, we'll see. Hopefully that's not what this means for Worthy. But yeah, Ian, we have seen guys like Juju Smith-Schuster come through and be wide receiver 3s in this offense. And to your point, yes, Juju hasn't had knees for years. As far as I know, DeAndre Hopkins still has one knee. I just don't know if he has the other knee. We did have the partial tear in the MCL that happened this preseason. That was kind of that weird story that broke late. And we're like, oh, great. You mean you're not just shutting him down for a period of time? No, we're going to keep him active and just not play him that much every game, which was a really odd approach, which probably tells us there wasn't anything they could do to repair it to have him come back for the season. So it feels like this is something he's playing through, but I'm not a doctor, and the Chiefs have doctors, so they've checked this all out, and apparently they're good to go on DeAndre Hopkins. I will say this, Ian, over not the last 3 games, but weeks 3, 4, and 6. They had a bye in week 5. We did see a little bit of a flash from DeAndre Hopkins as far as that old school target earning ability that we loved from DeAndre back in the day. He had targets per route run of 32%, 31%, and 29%. Now, again, they still never gave him a full-time role. After the bye was the highest that we saw him get to was a 70% route participation, and they immediately ramped him back down in week 7 to 55%. And who knows? Maybe that was because they were just protecting him, knowing that they're probably trying to trade him still. So I think there is a chance that Hopkins, if he comes out and does what he did for those 3 weeks in the Chiefs offense, like he's going to be a wide receiver too. I think at a worst case, he's probably a wide receiver 3. I do think you've got to be a bit, you've got to be a bit worried. Like, can it last if he's still dealing with this injury? A, can he get a full workload? I think that's the real key. And then B, like, what's the risk of re-injury here? And knowing that if it's something he's dealing with and trying to have, and he has to maintain all season, and there's a maintenance program for him, that could really cap the ceiling. If we saw DeAndre Hopkins suddenly out there in a 90% route participation rate, like, dude, we would probably feel really good about him with the Chiefs.
Chris, it really is one of those things where, yeah, there are some red flags here. We have the age, we have the injury, we have the career low counting numbers through 7 weeks. Will Levis experience certainly having plenty to do with that. But I do think, Chris, at the end of the day, it's almost like Dwain kind of said with Amari Cooper. We've been talking for months. Hey, add this wide receiver to the Chiefs. That's the best spot. So maybe we shouldn't be overthinking this. Hopkins with the Chiefs, certainly a nice real life upgrade in. And Fantasyland, to Dwayne's point, if he does get that full-time role, not a given it happens in week 8, but even just a little bit down the line, going to be tough to rank more than 20, 25 wide receivers ahead of him.
Right, since we haven't been able to rank any of the other wide receivers that Patrick Mahomes is currently throwing to, like, in that top 24, at least with some sense of confidence, because I'm with both of you. If we can't really see the production coming from Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster in and out of the lineup, I mean, any of those other guys that we were hoping to see get on the same page as Patrick Mahomes, and it just hasn't been there for them, I think DeAndre Hopkins going to the Chiefs signals that they need to have that additional element. And now with Marquise Brown, like, being out of the lineup for however many weeks, we've seen how limited this pass game has been from Patrick Mahomes being able to really work the outside of the field, and that's where DeAndre has really done most of his damage. I mean, Patrick Mahomes right now, EPA per dropback on pass attempts that have gone over 10 air yards, around like the Will Levis type of from a ranking standpoint. So if we really want him to push the ball downfield and continue to be that high flying offense that we hope that they would be at some point throughout the season, having a guy like DeAndre Hopkins come in really signals that they can at least want to try and move back to that version of their offense. And while they still are, I mean, the undefeated in the league, undefeated as of right now, I mean, if they wanted to continue to play that type of football that's going to enable them to have that perfect season or at least be competitive once they get into the playoffs, I mean, bringing in a guy like Hopkins is the way to do it.
Obviously, Chiefs still winning, to Chris's point, and they do have one of the highest success rates in the league. Mahomes scrambling is out of this world. But yeah, the passing production specifically really just has not been close to what we've seen in past years. Patrick Mahomes passing touchdowns in the first 6 games of the season, guys. 2018, he had 18, then 14, then 15, then 18, then 17. Last year, 11, and just 6 in 2024 so far. So DeAndre Hopkins, maybe Dwayne showing us that our new draft strategy should be draft old, potentially washed up wide receivers on bad teams in the hopes they eventually get traded for a good one. Certainly working out so far for Amari Cooper, Devontae Adams, and now DeAndre Hopkins. So slight upgrade for Calvin Ridley as well in Tennessee. One less, mouth to deal with. But as Dwayne kind of mentioned, wasn't like we were seeing Hopkins in much of a full-time role anyway. And Ridley, already the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL in unrealized air yards. Again, I think more of a problem with the quarterback throwing him the football than necessarily not getting enough target volume in the first place. So all in all, good news for the Chiefs. I can't believe we let them continue to get away with this. Guys, let's talk about another potential trade. Nothing happening just yet. Maybe not imminent, but Diana Rossini has reported that the Rams have called multiple teams about trading Cooper Kupp. Dwayne, a situation where we're hoping to see him on Thursday night, has been practicing in full all week, presumably set for, 20 plus targets. That seems to be the case whenever Puka Nacua is out of the lineup. But how likely do you think this really could be? Obviously, all 32 teams better off with Cooper Kupp, but let's face it, bit of an older wide receiver who hasn't made a habit of staying healthy in recent years.
Yeah, I struggle to see how this deal gets done because I don't know that the Rams would get enough in return to just make it worth trading away a fan favorite in Cooper Kupp and just completely giving up on this season. We're talking about a player that's owed, $29.7 million. That's the salary cap charge for this season, Ian. Then you got $20 million on each of the next 2 years. So it's going to be something where they're probably going to also have to eat part of those dollars. And so if you have a team coming to you and they're like, hey, we'll give you a third for Cooper Kupp, and then you got to eat a portion of this contract, like, is it really worth it? Is it really worth even doing? So we'll leave it open. But here's the other thing I'm going to say, man. Wherever Cooper Kupp goes, it's going to be worse than what he's doing with the Rams, unless Stafford were to get traded. We heard that floated from Florio yesterday. We don't know if there's any truth to that. But if Stafford were gone, that would hurt Kupp. And then you might think, okay, it'd be better if he was traded. But if Stafford is a Ram, You do not want Cooper Kupp going anywhere else. Cooper Kupp's a really good player, but here's what I'm going to say. I doubt any other team will know how to use him the way that McVay has. I mean, we're talking about a team, Ian, that over the last 3 seasons has led the team in, motion at the snap. We talked about that all offseason, how important that is. That's a 50% bump in PPR points per route run over the last 4 years of data. Cooper Kupp, that's going to go away this year. Right now, the Rams are at 78% of their passing snaps come with a wide receiver in motion at the snap. That's going away. So you're immediately going to lose that schematic advantage of really having someone that knows how to keep Cooper Kupp isolated in the slot, keep him away from the best coverage, moves him all over. Cooper Kupp, guys, I'm not saying he's not good, but I will say this is one of those schemes where you're getting an extra 5, 6, 7% target share based on the relationship with the quarterback and the scheme that you're playing in. That all goes away. And if you suddenly put Cooper Kupp outside on an island with a quarterback that doesn't know him, you're not getting a wide receiver 1. I think you're going to have a wide receiver 2. So maybe the sharp move here is if you really are concerned that Cooper Kupp is going to get moved. I don't, but if you're really worried about it, I would trade him potentially now. Like if someone's still looking at him returning to the Rams and being a top 3 asset, then I would just move on now. Now you need to get something really good, because if he doesn't and he stays there and then you're having to stare at Cooper Kupp in your opponent's lineup next weekend, you're not going to feel good about it. In fact, you're going to feel really terrible. So again, I don't think he gets moved, Ian, but if he does, it doesn't really matter where he lands. I think it's going to be a dramatic downgrade to his fantasy status.
Yeah. I was going to say, man, was getting the fantasy ranks together last night, and let me see where we ended up with on Kupp, but it was awfully, freaking high up there. Of course, we have our AJBs at the top, but yeah, Dwain, we both have Cooper Kupp as our wide receiver 8 ahead of this week. Really have a tough time looking at him on any other offense and seeing him anywhere close to that, honestly.
And that's That's only because we're worried about an injury potentially coming back. If we knew Cooper Kupp was 100% and going to play all the snaps, Ian, you and I would have him even higher. We'd have him in the top 3.
When he got injured against the Cardinals, he was our wide receiver 1. That's the upside we have going for us. So, Chris, I mean, there are teams where he wouldn't be dead in the water. I think honestly, Patriots with Drake May now, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Buccaneers with no Godwin, the Saints. There are teams out there where, okay, to Dwayne's point, I think he could be a wide receiver 2-esque, but make no mistake about it. The top 10 numbers we want in Fantasyland, that involves Kupp staying put in LA.
Right. And to Dwayne's point, like if he were to go to another roster, he wouldn't have the same schematic advantage as he does right now with LA. And without that connection to Matthew Stafford and also having Sean McVay, I wouldn't have the same level of confidence like in Kupp as I do right now. So I'm with both of you guys. Like it would make some sense to see Kupp move on. I think from a team building standpoint, where the Rams are sitting right now at 2-4, trying to salvage like what their future is going to look like in 25, 26, 27. I get why they want to try and float those rumors now and get ahead of things. But at the same time, for Kupp and for our purposes here in Fantasyland, for right now in the 2024 season, having him move on to another squad and having him to try and reconnect with another quarterback on another scheme, it just puts his workload that we've come to rely on so much in doubt. And so I'm hoping he stays. Also hoping that Matthew Stafford stays as well, and we don't really have to worry about his wide receiver 1 status for the rest of the season.
Funniest match by far, I think we can all agree, would be the Jets. And also maybe a low-key fire one would be the Washington Commanders. Get Terry McLaurin a little bit of help over there. People are wondering. So stay tuned with that one. Never a dull afternoon in the NFL these days. Hopefully, again, get some more eventful trades before the deadline. So that wraps up our 2 big news items, guys. But there were another handful of items I do want to get through before we get into the bulk of the show. Starting with Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels' quote status very much in doubt per Ian Rappaport as he continues to deal with that rib injury. Honestly, not a doctor, but I would be surprised if he plays this week, given, again, the 1-week nature. However, Rapture did add it's not something that's going to keep him out multiple games, so at least good news there. Also, Andy Dalton was in a car accident. Him and his family are fine and weren't transported by emergency personnel. He is currently being evaluated per the team. All the prayers up to the Dalton family. At running back Saints, RB Alvin Kamara got his 2-year, $24.5 million contract extension. Potentially could be retiring as a Saint now. Talk about a great great day to be great there. More good news, 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel is out of the hospital with that pneumonia issue. Still waiting to see if he is going to be playing in week 8. Bucs wide receiver Mike Evans, unfortunately, not expected to play until after the team's week 11 bye. He's getting an MRI today to determine the extent of that hamstring injury. He would need 665 yards, guys, over the final 7 games to get back to 1,000 yards, which, I would not put past him. Also, Chris Godwin out for the season, but I will note Todd Bowles said that there is an outside chance he could be back for a playoff run. So fingers crossed, it's dislocated ankle, seemingly not something that's going to be an issue into at a minimum 2025. Also, the Raiders signed wide receiver Terrence Marshall, if that's a thing. And the Eagles released wide receiver Paris Campbell. Guys, 2 or 3 of my best ball teams just absolutely weeping now with our round 18 pick, now a free agent. So hate to see that. Final note would just be Vikings tight end TJ Hawkinson, still limited in practice. Would kind of be surprised at this point if they are going to rush him to play this Thursday night. So that was the news, everybody. But now it is time to throw some shade. Shout out Knock Around, presenting our Throwing Shade segment, where you know what, we're gonna be dickheads here for a couple minutes, throw some shade at various storylines around the league. Last week, I believe it was the Colts specific injury reporting, but today, guys, it's just the injury gods in general, specifically at the wide receiver position, because oh my goodness, I feel like we're used to these running backs getting banged up. But hey, if you went 0 RB this year, God bless you, man, because it has been rough. We've had Tyreek Hill, just with Tua being injured, Puka Nacua, Nico Collins, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Rashee Rice, Jalen Waddle, Chris Godwin, Marquise Brown, Rashid Shaheed. Dwayne, I wasn't trying to name our entire draft strategy just now, but got pretty close, man. It's been a rough year in the injury streets.
I will say, after I finished the utilization report on Mondays, I try to go get some exercise in. And from the time I went to go exercise, we lost Deebo Samuel to pneumonia. Hoping Deebo's better. I know he got out of the hospital yesterday, but still, random stuff like that as well. Then we lose Mike Evans right away in that game, hamstring. You can tell by the way it goes down. He's at least missing another game, probably more. And then we lose Chris Godwin. Just 3 more things that happened. And earlier in that day, obviously, we lost the day before, we lost Brandon Ayuk for the season. So, yeah, historically, it has been a situation where the wide receivers have been a little less injury prone. But in any season, chaos can just happen, right? And we can have variables that are, just weird things happen. You get variance. And so I am interested to see how do people overreact to this next year, because we are an industry that loves to overreact. I will say this, though, Ian, when we're in there doing our rankings each week, it is really hard at this point to not have mostly all running backs at the top. We have multiple running backs who are actually healthy, who are in full-time roles, not sharing much of the backfield. And it's well, dadgum, where do I get Jamar Chase in? Can I get him in the top 8? CeeDee Lamb, is he in the top 8? I mean, with what Joe Mixon and some of these other guys are doing, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, there are so many backs getting just absolute crazy volume, and they're doing a lot with it and good offenses. It's not a great year for the receivers. It's really a year that we can chalk up to really running back, probably being the key way to go as far as your draft strategy. Now, it's early, guys, so don't get cocky. Don't get cocky. The injury gods could come for you. But right now, running backs, man, they're cleaning house.
Mm-hmm. Chris, I believe it was a friend of the show, JJ Zachariason, a.k.a. Late Round QB, noting that next year the top 15 overall players are all going to be running backs in ADP. Yes. Obviously, joking, Drake and joshing around a little bit there. But seriously, man, maybe we did overestimate the difference in injury possibility between the two positions, Chris, or maybe it's just one wonky season.
I think I'm going to go with one wonky season, because these injury rates at this point have they've been too much. I'm with both of you guys. I have rosters that had Rashee Rice on the roster at one point. I had to drop Chris Godwin from another squad this morning. And of course, Deebo Samuel. I lost on a team that I lost by 3 points with Deebo Samuel in my starting lineup. So it's just one of those weeks where you just look at your roster, you look at the score, just I'm on to week 8. I just got to keep it pushing. So let's just hope that we can at least tamp down a bit on the injuries. Let's pray to the injury gods we don't see another catastrophic event occur in the upcoming weeks. And we'll table the discussion on next year's draft strategy until we get to 2025, because I don't want to overreact. I'm with you, Dwayne. I don't want to be one of those drafters that says, I'm just going to draft running backs for the first 3 rounds. That's all I'm doing. Give me Devon Achane, give me Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, give me all those guys that I know they're going to be healthy throughout all of next year.
Hey, Ian and I did try that on a team. Ian tried that on Ian and I tried that on a couple teams just to be different and see what would happen. Well, we included Christian McCaffrey in it, so it still went wrong. I mean, we just had the one running back that wasn't going to play it down in the first half of the year. So I mean, there is that.
Yeah, just so depressing, guys. I'm going through my teams, and I'm not cutting one of these guys, even if they are out for the season, if I have the extra like IR spots, if it makes no difference. So it's like, oh, hey, Rashid Rice. Hey, Rashid Shaheed, trying to get you guys that championship ring, just hang on tight while we still can. So very unfortunate, but what is fortunate are these fantastic knock-around sunglasses, guys. I'm rocking the Bears editions right now. Just, pretty freaking great product, if I do say so myself, the Bears indeed. Because guys, if you do head to knockaround.com and pick up your new go-to pair of polarized shades, you'll find that you can find plenty of them for less than $50. With over 25 frame styles and dozens of colors, you are guaranteed to find sunglasses that look good and protect your eyes with full UV 400 protection. And be sure to check out Knockaround's officially licensed NFL collection so you can rep your team all week and maybe, just maybe, all the way through the playoffs. Visit knockaround.com and use code LIFE for free shipping on your order. All right, fellas, it's Wednesday here on the Fantasy Life Show, which means we are going through the biggest fantasy relevant questions ahead of week 8. So, guys, let's kick things off with the return of the league's freaking reigning passing leader, Tua Tagovailoa, expecting to start this Sunday, assuming no setbacks throughout practice. So, Dwain, Tua's back. Now, it's been rough, okay? Right now, the Dolphins are averaging 11.7 points per game on offense. That's lower than the Bryce Young Panthers. That's lower than the Urban Meyer Jaguars. Even the winless Browns and Lions teams over the years average more points per game than that. So as much as I would love to say, hey, let's get back to partying like the top 5 offense we've seen over the past 2 years, do you really think, Dwain, that simply subbing Tua back and under center will fix everything else involved in right now what's been a dumpster fire of a Dolphins offense?
I do think so. I think quarterback play has just absolutely been huge for them. They did not have a good backup plan. I mean, Skylar Thompson was not good. Now, we didn't get to see much of Skylar Thompson. He immediately got hurt as well. But Tyler Huntley just can't run this offense. And it's kind of tough to put it on him to say, hey, a person we just signed off the street's going to come in and run the offense the same way as Tua. I know, Ian, he has a Pro Bowl on his resume. And, we can never take that thing away from Tyler Huntley. But, yeah, man, I have Tyreek Hill at wide receiver 3. I got A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson ahead of him this week. You've got him at wide receiver 4, so you're feeling great about Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle, I've got in the wide receiver 3 range. Would it surprise me if he puts up a wide receiver 2 performance this weekend? Absolutely not. If you've been having to suffer through, you can argue that no injury has had the kind of ramifications that the Tua injury has had, because it impacted Tyreek Hill, it's impacted Devon Achane, it's impacted Jalen Waddle, it's impacted Raheem Mostert. All these different players that were top 10 round picks in fantasy land were absolutely nuked whenever we lost Tua. So yes, I do think it is as simple as adding him back in, and we'll recalibrate next week. I mean, the first week back, he could be a little off, but he's been playing in the offense for multiple years. I expect Tua to get back out there, have his timing, and I expect them to make a massive point of loading up Tyreek Hill this weekend. I think, just after last week, look, we all love Mike McDaniel, and the community started to turn on him, right? They're like, come on, man. We come out of a bye week and we get 2 targets to Tyreek Hill, 2 targets to Jalen Waddle. Doesn't feel like a winning game plan. I get it. Jonnu Smith did some nice things. But yeah, man, I think it's back to status. It's back to the normal status with all these guys until they prove otherwise, in my opinion. I don't think you have to worry about them in the ranks.
Speaking of Jonnu coming off that tight end 2 finish, I know we talked about it on our Sunday night review show pod, but Dwain, I love seeing the 78% route rate. That's season high. Maybe he is going to be out there on the field more consistently, but I struggle to look at those targets and say, oh, this was a meaningful game plan out of the bye week to get him more involved. When, Tyreek and Waddle combined for 4 targets, because no sane man, especially Mike McDaniel, obviously would want that to happen. So, Chris, again, I like to think we're pretty plugged in with what's happening here. We do our homework and everything. But one thing I do like to do is kind of check what we're talking about versus what Vegas is talking about, because Lord knows they have plenty of money at stake. And right now we do have the Dolphins implied team total resting at 24.75 points, man. That's just underneath the Bills, ahead of teams like the Jets and Falcons. So, seems like, Chris, Vegas is expecting us to get back to partying like it's 2022 and 2023 again. So maybe we should too.
I'm with that. We talked a bit more on Monday about the fact that the quarterbacks were backing up Tua just didn't really fit the blind faith that was required for the Dolphins offense. From a time to throw standpoint, like Tua Tagovailoa was at one of the fastest like trigger points like in the league, about 2.4, 2.5 seconds. And those guys weren't really like willing to throw the ball downfield without seeing their guys open. And without like Tyreek Hill, Jalen like getting out like open, creating separation like they typically can, like those guys weren't pulling the trigger. So if Tua does come back, I'm with both of you guys in the sense that we should push Tyreek Hill back up into the wide receiver 1 conversation. Jalen Waddle does fall into that wide receiver 2, like high end wide receiver 3, just based off his usage. Like that's where we should really start to value those guys. And with Devon Achane, I think the most encouraging sign I saw from him and just this past week after coming back from the concussion, we did see him get like still have like the primarily being the top rusher like for Miami. Mm-hmm. Didn't get all of the touches from inside the 5. That is like a general concern. Saw most of like work in from there. But 14% target share. So in PPR leagues, you love that. So overall, I'm with both of you in the sense that this should be a favorable offense, like one we should want to target moving forward. And look at their schedule. I mean, Arizona, like this coming week, Buffalo the week after, Rams after that. And it sounds like they're at least trying to move some pieces around, or at least with the Rams, with the rumors circling the Rams, like that might be an offense we want to target as well. So overall, like with Tua back in the fold, Tyreek, Jalen, Devon Achane, like get those guys in their rosters right now.
Even after that Rams game, Chris, they get a Raiders defense that may or may not have Max Crosby by that point. And then a Patriots team that ranks 29th right now in EPA allowed per dropback. So, guys, again, optimistic that we see the greatest show on surf get back to doing what they do best, and that is scoring a lot of points in a hurry. All right, now let's move on to another quarterback upgrade going down. It's Jameis time in Cleveland, guys. We had the Dorian Thompson-Robinson, thing going on last week with him elevated to QB2. However, we did have Jordan Schultz actually come out and report and say that his understanding is that DTR was Watson's backup strictly from a game plan standpoint. So again, would have been nice to get that clarity from another insider a bit earlier. We appreciate Jordan telling us now, of course, but maybe it does make sense, Dwain, because we did see out there, DTR with the read option game, there's a lot of good things he can do in that facet. So maybe it was more of a sub-package decision. Regardless of all that, he's still dealing with the finger injury. So the time is now for Jameis Winston under center. How high do you rank Jameis in the quarterback ranks, and who benefits the most among his pass catchers?
Yeah, it's not so much where do we move Jameis, I think, in the ranks. Like, you're still going to look at Jameis as probably a low-end QB2 to start. Maybe you get him into the mid-range QB2, category. But, we really need to see some of these other wide receivers step up. We know that we feel good about David Njoku, feel really good about what we saw last week from Cedric Tillman. Jerry Jeudy, once again, another season, missing in action. So Jerry Jeudy, I'm done. I'm done with Jerry Jeudy at this point. He has to come out and have like a 300-yard game for me to even realize that this guy could be on a fantasy roster. We've just been waiting too long. And he was a promising prospect, but we're past that phase. We're no longer in the prospect phase. We're in the, hey, get something done out here, Jerry Jeudy phase. So I would say because of the weapons, man, I don't think that it'll just suddenly be Jameis being somebody we want to have in our fantasy lineups, but I do think he helps all those players. Look, Kevin Stefanski took his whole offense and threw it in the trash for Deshaun Watson. And it's kind of funny because now he's getting victory lapped. Everyone making fun of his scheme, making fun of all the things he's doing. Guys, he did all those things to try to make the offense something that would work for Deshaun Watson. Go back and look at Kevin Stefanski's offense from 3 and 4 years ago, doing all the stuff we see from Kyle Shanahan, doing all the stuff we see from Kevin O'Connell, using these condensed formations, getting the heavy packages, using play action, leaning into his run game to set up the pass, like all those sort of things he used to do. But I think it's a lot to change back to that in the middle of the season, Ian. But Jameis gives you a chance to probably actually come out here and run the offense you designed for Deshaun Watson in a better way. So I do think that this is going to be an improvement for the Browns. We'll see how that adds up in the win-loss category. Jameis is going to Jameis. He's going to throw some picks. He's probably going to get stripped, sacked, fumble for a touchdown. All that stuff's coming. But I will say this, Cedric Tillman, and David Njoku are the two players I am the most interested in. Cedric Tillman last weekend, we talked about him on the Sunday night show. We talked about him yesterday in the utilization report, so I won't go on and on. But he had a 24% target share, taking over that starting role for Amari Cooper. He's only in his second year, third-round draft pick out of Tennessee, and he does a lot of the things that Jameis likes. He's the guy that can work down the field, win those contested catches like you used to see from Mike Evans. I'm not calling him Mike Evans, guys. Calm down. But he is the guy on the team. Jerry Jeudy doesn't do that, period. Jerry Jeudy has to be wide open, and then we'll see if he decides to do anything. Cedric Tillman's going to be the guy, in my opinion, that we will see Jameis gravitate to.
We'll see if Stefanski lets Jameis go full Jameis out there. I mean, they did have a negative 9% dropback rate over expected last week. However, that was with DTR under center, so we'll see what they do with the full week of game planning. Chris, again, Dwain,
they're
I thought,
top four for the season, Ian. Sorry, but they're top four for the season. And they're number three. Yeah, they're 5 point. Yeah, I know, but still 5.2%. Like, let's say they go neutral. They're not going run heavy. Like, I just don't see it. And maybe when Chubb's fully healthy, but I don't see it yet.
I'm just saying the Stefanski offense, I'm with you, where they've run, more play action stuff in the past, but they've also been way more run heavy in the past too.
Well, that was my point. They have been, that's what I mean. They were a 49er style offense, and that's what the Vikings are this year. I mean, the Vikings are slightly, positive in drop back rate over expected, but yeah, more of a, hey, let's hit our plays through the big plays in the passing game, not just through pure passing volume. Yeah. So we're on the same page.
Yeah, we are on the same page. Chris, again, so we'll see what happens with Tillman and Jeudy. Still a bit to be worked out there, but I think we can all agree that David Njoku is the big-time winner. Had the 14 targets last week. I think finished as top 3 tight end in Fantasyland. And now looking ahead, Chris, this week I have Brock Bowers, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, and Sam Laporta ranked ahead of David Njoku. That's it, man. So my tight end 6 ahead of guys like Jake Ferguson, Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, Cole Kmet. Am I being too optimistic, or do you think that's about right?
No, I think that's about right. Just look at how much he was used spread out across all of the quarterbacks that were, whether it was Deshaun Watson, like hitting him for a couple, DTR hitting him for a couple, and of course, Jameis Winston coming in and actually putting a really good ball like for Njoku at the back of the end zone to allow Njoku to use his frame to high point the ball and come down with it. So I thought that was a really good connection between the two. But out of all of the tight ends so far, I mean, Njoku's running one of the lower route trees, from an average depth of target perspective, which should allow him to be that safety blanket for Jameis. Now, I do think that there's a chance that Jameis tries to go the full Jameis, wants to push the ball downfield. 10.5 air yards per attempt. That was one of the highest in the league just this past week. But also, if the offense continues to be somewhat more efficient, running the offense that Kevin Stefanski wants to try and design, also hitting the middle of the field a bit more. I mean, these are the types of ways that Njoku could at least get into the red zone a bit more and can continue to be that weapon for Jameis Winston and allowed to be a valuable fantasy asset for the rest of us. So I'm with it. I think Njoku should be up there in the top 5, top six ranks for the rest of the season.
Ian, how high do you have Jeudy this week? Yeah, no, I am. Ooh. I am. I do think that Njoku with Winston under center, I mean, we've already talked about it. Njoku is a top 6 tight end. It's just a matter of does he climb into the top 3? I mean, we've had 32% and 28% target shares over the last 2 games. He's got the highest utilization score over the last 2 games outside of Brock Bowers. So, I mean, and this is a guy that we saw do it last year. The big question is, will Jameis actually go underneath and get the ball to Njoku?
Yeah, that's
or
my question. Yeah.
Might they actually change Njoku's the way they use him a little bit? Njoku has more in him than just running drag routes. They could definitely use this guy in a little bit of a different way and get him in Jameis's line of vision. Jameis might not see him down there on that 3-yard drag. He's going to be looking downfield. So I think that is the one risk. My question to you guys, and I know I was joking about Jerry Jeudy, but how high do you push Tillman and Jeudy with the news of it being Jameis? Because I'm adjusting the ranks right now, because yesterday when I did the first pass at the ranks, I was assuming DTR would still be under center.
I have right now Jerry Jeudy, assuming we know now that Jameis is under center. Jeudy as my wide receiver 43 and Tillman as my wide receiver 45. I saw what happened last week, and that was nice. I've been hurt just like you have, Dwain, with Jerry Jeudy in the past. I'm not saying he's here to stay as this, upside guy, but let's face it, the Browns still do have 52.5 million reasons to try to make this work with, a guy who at certain points of his career has been lauded as a pretty damn good route runner.
I'd be willing to maybe flip them in the ranks just for this 1 week, and not like it's you have a massive gap in them, Ian, just because we saw a slightly different, slightly more diverse route tree like for Cedric Tillman. Like they had Tillman on they used him on a screen pass, a couple of hitches like here and there, and also like on a go route. So we saw that just hitting on all three levels, and Winston was willing to at least look at him and like get him a couple of targets, or at least one target like at each level of the field. So if we already have that, and also seeing at least was Judy credited with a drop, I think, on one of Winston's passes, if I'm remembering correctly, down the right sideline. So it's like I do have some concerns about where Judy is at, like with his being able to connect with Jameis Winston, whereas Tillman, right out of the gate, we saw that he was able to connect with Winston. So I'm willing to push Tillman a little bit ahead, but let's see how this week goes. With a full complement of snaps for both of them.
Like Dwain, I'm not trying to call out things you said in the past, but you've said not to be a victim of 1 week moments. And going into last week, man, Tillman had 9 yards the entire season. Last week was cool and everything, but we still got to go Judy rest of the season, right?
I'm going Tillman. No, I mean, Tillman hadn't had a role. I mean, he hadn't been on the field. I mean, he gets out there for 1 week and he does this thing. Yeah, well, I mean, he's playing behind, another player that they've got a lot of money invested in, Amari Cooper. I mean, they brought in Jerry Jeudy. I'm sorry. I mean, I've seen Jerry Jeudy long enough. I'm going to rank Tillman ahead of Jeudy this week. I can end up being wrong. Here's my thing. I've seen Jerry Jeudy for 5 years. It's not good. It's mediocre. It's a mediocre wide receiver. Never has really been a high-end target earner. To your point, he's had games here and there where we're like, oh, Jerry Jeudy. And then it's like, oh, no, it's Jerry Jeudy. It's really just still Jerry Jeudy. So I'm willing to get in on Tillman, this week. And we'll see if I'm wrong. I'm not that worried about it. I'm fine going back to Jeudy if he really proves it. But we'll see. Again, Jerry Jeudy, if he'd done more over his career, I'd be excited. But he's been a bust for being a round one wide receiver.
You know whose fault it is, guys? It's Jimmy Haslam's pocketbook. That's whose fault it is right now. That's whose fault it is.
I was going to say it's one of those things where, yes, Jeudy has achieved more than Tillman, but I guess the unknown factor could, again, just be enough to boost Tillman in those ranks. So maybe the answer is both, guys, because if Jameis does go full, Jameis should be plenty of passing volume, downfield, fantasy-friendly variety. And at least this week, facing a Ravens defense has allowed the third most PPR points per game to opposing wide receivers. So, again, not so sure if this is going to help the Browns' real-life win-loss, record and their playoff aspirations, but at a minimum, going to be much more fun to watch them play. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get in some running back discourse here. Specifically, what players could be prime touchdown regression candidates in the positive sense of the term here moving forward? And Dwain, I want to start off with some Pittsburgh Steelers RBs because I know in your utilization report, you were talking about the potential for Jaylen Warren to get going here over the next few weeks, but also got to give credit to Najee Harris, playing honestly some of the best football of his career, I would say, over these past 2 games.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Najee, and if you look at it, the work inside the 5-yard line, he's going to get more of it with Justin Fields not in the picture to potentially steal some of those carries. Now, Justin Fields doesn't get to do the tush push, so it's not like what we have with Jalen Hurts or even with Josh Allen in Buffalo. He's not at that kind of risk. But anytime you have a running quarterback down there, they can snipe some of those looks from you. So when we look at those snaps inside the 5-yard line, Najee's been a major part of that. He is the archetype of back end that could be punching in more touchdowns. So if Russell Wilson, really does kind of take this offense to another level, I think that's the real question here is what does Russ really do? He looked good in that one game, but it is one game, folks. And I went back and I watched some of that, Ian. I was kind of surprised the opposing defense was giving him a lot of these single high looks. That's the look that Russ has, sliced and diced all his career. Now, I get it. It was the Jets. They have outside corners that they feel very comfortable giving anyone that kind of look because they are loaded at that position. But, man, those are the balls that Russ has traditionally hit. So I want to see what does Russ look like whenever he has to take on some of the more what we would now call traditional NFL defenses that just basically want to play like a bunch of babies and say you can't have a big play. We'll see what that does to Russ. So we'll see where that lands. But if this offense does take a step forward and Najee continues to get that role we just talked about, yes, man, he could be due for massive positive regression. He's the kind of guy that could score 10 rushing touchdowns like down the stretch, especially given how much the Steelers still want to run the ball. Even though Fields is gone, man, still a very, very heavy run team.
Certainly getting helped by the volume, but again, kudos to Najee in particular, just in his own right. Weeks 1 through 5, 19 total missed tackles forced on the ground. Last 2 weeks, all the way up there at 17, 43% missed tackles forced rate, Dwain. You know as well as I do, that is absolutely ridiculous to see from the former first-round pick. Chris, my question for you, man. Josh Jacobs and Devon Achane. We are talking about the players with the most rush attempts this season with 1 or less touchdowns. For Jacobs, we have 120 and Achane in second place at 71. Who do you prefer to have on your fantasy team the rest of the year?
Give me Josh Jacobs, I think, but here's why. I'll lay it out. I have some. I am somewhat. I'm on both sides of this because we were just talking about what the impact of Tua coming back to the Dolphins roster could be. And if we are trying to push Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and, of course, Devon Achane comes along for the ride, you could have this sense where Devon Achane comes back into that RB1 conversation that we expected. But let me make the case for Josh Jacobs. As of right now, the Packers, they sit at around the top 5, top 6 in total touchdowns being scored, top 12 in EPA per play, all of the efficiency metrics for an offense that we would want to see, like since Jordan Love has returned. But out of those like 21-ish touchdowns, like 17 of them have been scored through the air. And of course, with Jordan Love essentially being the second coming of Brett Favre, we can understand why most of those touchdowns have skewed more towards the pass than the run. But if we can expect the same level of efficiency for the Packers offense moving forward, we could also assume that more of those are going to lend themselves more to rushing touchdowns. And that's where Josh Jacobs comes in. Looking at our utilization score since Jordan Love has come back to the roster, I mean, Jacobs sits at about a 7.7 like utilization score, and comparing that across like the rest of the running backs, that's like you can see guys like Chuba Hubbard, Jordan Mason, Jahmyr Gibbs, all of the guys that have been in that top 12 discussion throughout the year. They've been producing like RB1s. Jacobs is being used like one. And given the way that the Packers offense has been operating, I expect him to be producing like one moving forward. So I give the lean to Josh Jacobs, given the utilization. But at the same time, like if I just see all of the targets going to Devon Achane, I have the same sense of hype for Miami's offense as I do with Tua being back. It's like, man, that's a tough decision, but I'll give it to Jacobs for right now.
You also could have just said, yes, you want both of them on the team. I would have accepted that answer
that's
as well. I'm with you. Good things coming for both guys, especially Achane potentially, guys. Already has 4 games with, over 15 touches, 15 opportunities, I should say. That was as many as he had last year already. So good stuff there. Final running back I want to touch on, Dwain, is someone who you've been hyping up as a potential RB1 down the stretch. J.K. Dobbins. If he just gets some goal line carries, man, only 1 carry inside the 5-yard line this season, pulling a 2023 Breece Hall on us. So when we look at Dobbins and the Chargers, no, not necessarily expecting them to all of a sudden become this top 5 scoring offense, but upcoming matchups, Dwain, against the Saints, the Browns, and the Titans, maybe we get some of that fantasy-friendly positive game script that then could help elevate Dobbins in fantasy land.
Well, we have one of the most drop back heavy teams in the league anyway, right? Drop back rate over expected. They are a big minus in that category. Now, last week, I haven't got to go back and watch the film and the way that game, was on ESPN Plus, and I don't have ESPN Plus. I didn't get to watch all of it live. I just saw the highlights that were getting posted. Yeah. So looking at that situation, I don't know what the Cardinals did, but obviously they loaded the box because this was the first game where actually we saw the Chargers throw the ball a lot. So they must have said, we want to see if Justin Herbert is still good and can beat us. And he did, or he didn't. The Cardinals won at the end, but Justin, Herbert did come out and throw for over 300 yards for the first time this year. But anyway, where I was taking it, J.K. Dobbins, again, look, over the last 4 games, man, I mean, he has been absolutely astronomical from a standpoint of playing time. 64%, 72%, 73%, 69% snap shares.
Nice.
So this guy is absolutely not leaving the field. That's a full-time role. If you look at his rushing attempts over that same span, Ian, right now he's sitting at 68% over those 4 games, and he's got a utilization score of 7.3. So historically, looking at players that have been in that range, they've been borderline running back ones. And I know whenever we look at Dobbins, you also have that potential for that 25 carry outburst like he had the week before, whenever they didn't have a team completely loading the box. Again, assuming that's what happened with the Cardinals and forcing them to try to throw the ball more. It takes a lot to get Harbaugh and Roman off of that game plan. So yeah, really do love J.K. Dobbins the rest of the way. I think they're going to really continue to stick with him. The one challenge I would say for Dobbins, Ian, is we have seen the efficiency slowly deteriorate as his workload has increased. Early in the year, watching the film, you're seeing a lot of these burst plays. Yeah, he didn't have the long speed to get, to break the thing all the way into the end zone. But I do wonder, like the 2 Achilles surgeries, that sort of thing, does that take its toll on him over the course of the season if he's continuing to get this kind of workload? That would be the one potential red flag, not looking quite as fresh as what we saw over those first few weeks.
One Achilles, but a devastating knee injury that had a bunch of different
my bad. Yeah, the other knee. Yeah.
Might have been worse. Might have been worse than
I'm thinking
Achilles
of Akers
with all the. Yeah, you're good.
The 2 Achilles, yeah.
We got enough Achilles going around, man. Very understandable. But again, guys, just based on some of the usage, if he can get right, J.K. Dobbins joins Devon Achane, Josh Jacobs, and the Steelers RBs. It's guys that maybe we should expect to see dancing in the end zone a bit more often as we get into the second half of the season. So more goodness on the way, everybody. But first, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill is in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. The crown is yours. Again, that is $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. Sports betting is not yet available in your state. Don't worry, you can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, fellas, we talked about some running backs maybe moving up because of their volume. You could say that for these wide receivers as well, but then again, they've already had a lot of volume and not much has come of it. Of course, I'm talking about Jackson Smith-Njigba, Cortland Sutton, Wan'Dale Robinson, and yes, even the artist known as Maserati Marv, Marvin Harrison Jr. So, Dwain, when I say those names, again, JSN, Sutton, Wan'Dale, and Marv, who would you be willing to put, I guess, a couple of dollars on, expecting them to have more fantasy production come out of a workload that, again, has been pretty good to this point?
Yeah, it's Marvin Harrison Jr., because he's the guy that can attack all levels of the field. Hasn't been as good deep, and I get it, probably having to run too many deep routes. Really worried about Kyler. But man, a strong target share, strong air yard share. He has both components of that. These guys are all pretty close in utilization score. But remember, your fantasy scoring is part of the utilization score. That's like 23% of the score. So Wan'Dale and Jackson Smith-Njigba, they're kind of doing what you would expect with their opportunities, given that they're such low ADOT targets. They're typically PPR scam type players, and it's hard to find a ceiling with those guys because how do we unlock the touchdown potential? How do we unlock the big play potential? Well, that's got to come from big plays after the catch, and we haven't seen that, especially from JSN this year. So I do believe that it would be Marvin Harrison Jr. with the next most to add. And I would say after that, Cortland Sutton would be the other guy that I think could improve the most out of that foursome.
Most fantasy points below expected in the NFL this year is Cortland Sutton. That's life when you have the league's second least accurate quarterback in CPOE and, of course, Bo Nix. So, guys, shocked me yesterday. Wan'Dale Robinson has the second most targets in the entire NFL right now. Just the, wide receiver 28 in PPR points per game, though. So, still a great value with where you drafted him. Don't get it twisted. But, yeah pretty wild seeing that discrepancy overall. So, JSN, as I said on the show yesterday, I believe, more targets this year, or the same, I believe, as Stephon Diggs, more than Jamar Chase, more than Terry McLaurin, just hasn't done much with it. So, maybe not having DK Metcalf for a week gets him a couple more, but, hasn't exactly been an issue to this point. Not exactly expecting him to all of a sudden ascend into wide receiver 1 territory, particularly this week against a tough Bills defense. Let's get into our last question of the day, guys. It's fraud check time, where we look at some of the best performances from week 7 and determine if they're going to continue or if maybe we're looking at some fraud. So, Chris, top 5 performances. We had Russell Wilson as the QB3, Javonte Williams as the RB5, Rashad Bateman as the wide receiver 3, and Jonnu Smith as the tight end 2. If you had to call at least one of these guys a complete living fraud, who would it be?
I'm probably not going to call a professional football player a fraud to their face, just for my own personal safety. But if I were to at least put them out there from a fantasy standpoint, I'm calling Rashad Bateman a fraud, or at least his production this past week a fraud. Over 50% of the team's air yards, over like a 23-yard average depth of target. I'm assuming that's not going to have, like, neither of those two. The average depth of target might stick because that is the way that he has been used as that perimeter receiver for Lamar Jackson. But over 50% of the team's air yards, I will call that at least fraudulent for this one particular week. And we've seen that from Rashad Bateman like over the years. Like, he has popped up for some of these big games, but then it turns back to the Zay Flowers show. And then, of course, just this past week, we've seen it turn back to the Mark Andrews show for a lot of fantasy managers that were hoping to see Andrews get back into the box. We saw that twice just this past week. So with, as well as Lamar Jackson has played in prime time, we watched him do it and actually and light up the Bucs secondary. I'm assuming this isn't going to be a standard thing moving forward. So I'm calling Rashad Bateman the fraud for week 7.
Fourth in ESPN's open scorer this year. I sent out some highlights last week before the big game about just how well his route running has been when healthy. But I'm with you, man. Only 4 targets. And as we've seen with Mark Andrews almost the entire season, really tough to get a pinpoint on exactly anyone in this Ravens offense going off on a week-to-week basis. Could help, though, if we see Zay Flowers miss some time with that ankle injury. Dwayne kind of talked about Johnny Smith being a bit of a fraud earlier in the show, so I'm not going to give you that softball. But looking at Javonte Williams, man, someone who, ripped off a pretty freaking great performance last week, finally found the end zone on multiple occasions, and someone who I know his utilization was looking good even throughout some of those duds. Do you think he can keep on keeping on? Because at least for this week, man, home against the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I think he's in a really good spot this week, but he's just a player that was due for regression, and here's the nature of the way that works. We don't know for sure when it's going to come. We just know that the data is telling us eventually this player's probably going to have some good performances because players like him in the past have performed well. And that's what the utilization score has been telling us about a lot of these players. So I would say now Javonte Williams is a sell high. He's not going to be a running back 5 every week, but I will tell you this, he's good enough to be in the running back 2 conversation as far as his usage. And he's starting to look a little better. I think we're starting to see a little bit closer version of Javonte that looks like what we saw early on in his career, Ian. And that's been missing. Some of that lateral agility, some of that short area explosiveness, just going back and watching him a little bit. Really nice. Now, you might not want to trade him this week because, to your point, Ian, he is playing against the Carolina Panthers, one of the best matchups in the NFL for running back, so you want him in your lineups. As far as the other, I'm with Chris. I'm not calling anyone that puts on NFL shoulder pads a fraud. But I would say all of these guys are due, just by the nature of how high they finished last week. They're all due to slide back in the opposite direction because, those were pretty high heights to reach.
What's the nicer term that we want to be using here? Fraud is apparently out of line. Okay, you guys got something better?
It's a fugazi. Yeah, the fugazi report, man. Man, look, I know we're just having fun here, but I think all these guys are due for regression the opposite way. Sans Javonte in this matchup against the Panthers this weekend.
Wow. You guys heard from Dwayne. All these football players are complete living frauds. His words, not mine. Final point I will say on Javonte, Dwayne, I have it written down in my manifesto you can find at FantasyLife.com. Not a fraud, at least ahead of week 8, but maybe a sell high ahead of back-to-back tough spots in Baltimore and Kansas City. So, do with that what you will. And make sure you guys go ahead and check out that manifesto, always free on FantasyLife.com. Dwayne's utilization report, our consensus rankings, all that and so much more. So, Dwayne, myself, and Matthew Friedman back on Thursday breaking down some of the biggest rankings questions of the week. But otherwise, just have a great Wednesday. So for Chris, for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.